Welcome to our posts. Today. We will see stories of r/malicious compliance. You want to call my mom because I don't want to die. Okay, call her. It's my first time really using Reddit, so I apologize if it's not the best formatted. I was recently reminded of a malicious compliance I did as a kid. For context, I have an extremely bad peanut and tree nut allergy. If I eat or touch peanuts or nuts, I can go into anaphylactic shock, meaning my throat closes up and basically I'll choke to death. I carry an EpiPen with me at all times because of this. Additional information on this teacher. She hated children, like the type of teacher who yells at kids if they got something incorrectly. For the sake of keeping everything anonymous, I'll call her Mrs. Idiot and refer to myself as me. With that out of the way, to the story. I was in first grade, and by this time I had a good grasp on how bad my peanut and nut allergy was. Always read labels, never eat others' home-cooked meals, and that I shouldn't trust someone just because they say, "I don't think it has nuts in it." If you don't know, then don't offer those foods to small children who may not know any better. It was first grade, and I was having fun coloring something on paper waiting for my teacher. As I was finishing drawing, my teacher got out a fun activity worksheet involving candy. If I remember correctly, it involved counting or something math-related. As she was passing out the worksheets and candy, I noticed that they were M&Ms, which I'm allergic to. The interaction went something like this. Me: "Mrs. Idiot, I can't have these, I'm allergic." Mrs. Idiot: "They're original M&Ms, they don't have peanuts in them." Me: "But my mom says I'm allergic to the originals too." Mrs. Idiot: "They're fine, you can have them." To this day, I don't know why a teacher would ever tell a kid with allergies to eat something the kid thinks or knows they're allergic to. Also, while original M&Ms don't have peanuts or nuts directly in them, they're made on the same equipment as peanut M&Ms. This exchange went on for a while, with the idiotic teacher telling me that they're fine and me saying they're not. I think the teacher actually believed I was purposely trying to annoy her. Mrs. Idiot: "If you don't start behaving, I'm going to call your mother and you will be in big trouble." Younger me realized that my mom was just going to say the same thing. Instead of telling her that, I sat there and smiled at the teacher and said, "Okay, call her." I remember wondering why the teacher just didn't believe me. Looking back, that teacher definitely hated being told she was wrong, especially by a first grader. The idiot teacher looked annoyed but smug, I guess thinking that my mom would yell at me for not wanting to die or have a giant needle put in my thigh and being rushed to the hospital. Now I don't know the full exchange between my mom and the idiot teacher, because this was so long ago, and my mom doesn't remember what exactly was said, just that she was extremely angry. I know she tore into my teacher because me and everyone who was present in class could hear my mom yelling through the phone. I think for the first time ever I saw my idiotic teacher actually nervous. After my mom tore the teacher a new one, the teacher brought me to the corner of the room and handed me a bag of Skittles, which she apparently had the entire time. It sucked being alone for the activity, but I happily did my assignment eating my packet of Skittles, knowing fully well my teacher was simmering at her desk, annoyed that a 7-year-old knew better than she did. Later, it was revealed that my mom sent an email to the school's principal, which luckily for the idiotic teacher's case was my mom's second draft and had nicer words in it. That teacher had to do a refresher course on allergies by the nurse, which was shown to her already at the beginning of the year. I guess my school was desperate for teachers because she continued to teach at that school even though she had other incidents. As much as I'd like to say I ate the M&Ms and watched as her career tanked, blowing up like a Thanksgiving Day parade balloon, I did not. As the wise Sid the Sloth said, "No thanks, I choose life." Next story. Want me to keep talking even if nobody's listening? Alright. This happened when I was around 14-15. I was telling a story to my dad, and at one point he interrupted me, told me, "Keep talking, I'm listening very carefully," then left and closed the door. I didn't know it at the time, but he was very proud of this joke. He made it to my mom a couple of times. She never liked it. Anyway, I thought it was somewhat funny, but also pretty rude. Never mind, I knew an opportunity to teach my dad a lesson would come sooner than later, so I waited. And a couple of hours later, he would come and ask me to do the dishes. Me, you know I can't. Him, what do you mean you can't? Why can't you do the dishes? Me, I told you earlier. Him, no you didn't. Me, yes I did. You know this. You told me you were listening very carefully. Him realizing what I was doing. Oh right. Well, could you remind me? I forgot. Me, no way, I'm not repeating myself. I already gave you a very simple and rational explanation. My dad was strict, but he knew when he was beaten at his own game. He did the dishes that day, and he never made the joke again. Next story. I thought I mastered malicious compliance, then my wife showed me how it's really done. For this story, you need to know that I am the kind of person who will go a great distance for a good laugh, as you will see below. I love this story, and we tell it every once in a while, even though it has been more than 20 years. I live in the US and I own an IT support company. Many years ago, I used a cell phone company named Nextel. They had this great push-to-talk feature that turned your phone into a walkie-talkie, which was perfect for communicating with coworkers in my at work. However, their customer service was a nightmare. Anytime I needed to contact them, it would take at least 30-40 minutes on hold. Eventually, I had to switch to a cheaper service, which meant getting a new number. Now you can port your number to a new carrier, but back then, you had to change numbers if you switched carriers. I canceled all the phones on our plan except for mine, which I downgraded to an emergency plan costing about $10 a month. I left the old phone plugged in at my office and set my voicemail message to instruct callers of my new number. The phone just sat next to my desk on a shelf, plugged into a charger, so that I could see if anyone called. I could also hear the phone make a sound when it disconnected from the cellular network, and then a different sound when it connected to the cellular network. It connected and disconnected constantly there in my office. I would estimate that it only stayed connected to the network about 50% of the time. After 6 months, I decided to cancel it. I had to wait on hold for the customary 30 to 40 minutes just to cancel my service. After telling the service rep that I was always dropping off the network, and that I had already switched services, they verified the service problems on my account and canceled my entire plan. I wasn't under any contract at the time, so there was no problem canceling my service with Nextel. As expected, I got my final bill. It was somewhere around $10 since that was my monthly plan, just the emergency plan, and I didn't make any phone calls. I paid the bill and was happy to be done with that carrier. Then, the next month, I got a bill for 4 cents. Yes, just 4 cents. I figured it was a clerical error and ignored it, expecting them to write it off. But no, each month, another bill for 4 cents arrived. I was incredulous. I checked the postmark and saw that the postage to send me the bill was costing them 10 times more than the bill itself. And they kept sending the bill every month. I could have paid the bill, but it seemed ridiculous to write a check for 4 cents and spend more on a stamp. After 6 months, I finally had enough and decided on some very petty, malicious compliance. I decided to invest the 40 minutes on hold to call Nextel to work this out. By golly, if they wanted my 4 cents, I would give them my 4 cents. I planned to wait on hold for 40 minutes and pay the 4 cents with a credit card, knowing it would cost them more in fees. I told my wife about my plan, thinking it was the perfect malicious compliance story. But my wife, the true master of malicious compliance, suggested an even better idea. Call and ask if I could make payments on the 4 cents, splitting it into 2 payments on my credit card. OMG, I was in the presence of malicious royalty. I called, waited on hold for 40-45 minutes, and finally got through to a representative. The representative sounded like one of those airport terminal attendants who act like they are checking your reservations, but instead, they are writing a Stephen King-length novel. I could hear the clickety-clackety sound of the keyboard. The female representative was constantly typing as I explained that I had canceled my service but kept getting the final bill and proposed making payments. The representative, typing away, said she'd look up my account. As she typed away at her keyboard, I explained that I had gotten the final bill and that I would like to set up a payment plan to take care of the outstanding balance. I told her that I would like to pay half on my credit card today and pay the remaining half the following month. She was agreeing with me and typing away when suddenly she stopped typing and went quiet. "Sir?" she said. "Yes," I replied. "Are you aware of the balance amount?" "Yes," I said. 4 cents, she said. "Yes," I said. "I figured that you really wanted that 4 cents because you keep spending all this postage to send me bills each month. So I'm just calling you to take care of it." After a brief silence, I heard the clickety-clack of the keyboard again, and she said that I would not have to worry about the balance because she was writing it off. I insisted on giving my credit card for the first half of the payment, but she firmly dismissed it and assured me I wouldn't get any more bills. My wife's suggestion turned a simple prank into a masterpiece of malicious compliance. I may be good at it, but my wife is on another level, and you really have to want to do malicious compliance to wait on hold for 40 minutes. Next story. Weaponized incompetence. When I was a young technical writer, I worked for a small software company that was kind of winding down. Our administrator left or was let go. I can't remember, but in any case, she was not there any longer. At the next development meeting, they asked me to take minutes. I'm a writer, right? And a woman, so maybe that had something to do with it. Anyway, minute taking was not in my job description, but I agreed to do it. I had learned weaponized incompetence from my brothers who used to do chores so poorly that they would be reassigned to me. During the meeting, I wrote down every dumb joke and stupid comment the developers made. I included everything in the meeting minutes, which were distributed to the whole company. Fallout: they never asked me to take minutes again. Next story. If you don't like it, then leave. Okay, I will. Title was supposed to say then leave. Oops. Cast: Karen manager, store manager, meat manager, grocery manager. This story takes place about 2 months before I quit my job at the grocery store and started my first year of college. This story has a bit of exposition, so please bear with me. I was glad when I got to put my Karen manager in her place. Things had slowly started to cool down, and for the next few months it was business as usual. The old store manager had to open another store, so they brought in a new one. This one was very professional and quite kind. This store manager always recognized various employees in different departments for their hard work. This recognition of us lower employees made our Karen manager less than happy. I had started to notice a lot more people being hired and everyone's hours suffered because of it. I found out later they did this because part-time employees could be paid less and they wanted to cut costs. 'Tis the life of a retail worker. I wanted to keep making money in preparation for college, so I went into Karen manager's office and said, "Hey, Karen manager. I noticed my hours were being cut and I wanted to see if I could pick up some extra shifts." She scoffed at me and said, "Karen manager, it's a department-wide decision. If you want hours, go to another department. I wouldn't waste your time though." I looked at her confused and asked, "Why not?" "Karen manager, they only have hard-working employees in their departments. You wouldn't fit in." I was dumbfounded. I thought Karen's BS bully routine was over, but boy was I wrong. I stood there unsure what to say. Meanwhile, Karen manager had another umbrage smile plastered on her face. I just turned around and walked out of her office. I didn't know if Karen manager had already lied to the other managers or not, but I might as well ask. I first went to the meat department and explained my situation. I told the manager that our department's hours were being cut and asked if I could do anything to help them out. The meat manager smiled warmly and said, "Meat manager, I understand how frustrating low hours can be. We have a guy on vacation for a few weeks and we have had to stay late to wash all the pans and plates for our meat. It's simple washing and drying. You get to wear headphones within reason and you would make what a starting meat associate would. Want the job?" I was beaming and immediately took the offer. The job was simple as he promised, and I took it seriously. I wanted to show other managers that I was a hard worker and reliable. 3 weeks passed by with no issue. Inevitably, their missing associate came back, and I had to be let go from that position. Luckily, I had spoken to the grocery manager the day before, and our conversation was somewhat similar. I explained my situation, and she understood. She said, "Grocery manager, you just need to tidy up the shelves, put out product on aisle-labeled carts, and help unload trucks when they come in. Your pay will be a starting grocery associate pay." For context, both types of associate pay were an increase from my normal department. I took the offer and immediately helped the grocery department. Everything was fine until grocery hired a full-time employee and I had to go back to my normal department. I expected business as usual, but I got one hell of a surprise. The first day back, Karen manager yanked me in her office. The conversation went like this. "Karen manager, what the hell do you think you are doing? Up? I told you our department's hours were cut." Me, "I know. You said I could try working with other departments. You also said some other nasty things, but I don't care to repeat those." She glared at me and said, "Karen manager, up. You are making our department look bad. We are trying to cut costs, and you are burning through hours we don't have." I decided to correct this smug Karen and said, "Me, I understand you want to cut costs, and you only have so many hours. I didn't take up any extra hours from our department. I took your rude suggestion and worked for other departments that were short-staffed and had an abundance of hours. I did nothing wrong." She growled at me and said, "Karen manager, listen up. It's not fair to others in our department if you get full-time and other employees don't." I held my ground and said, "Me? This system of hiring tons of part-timers is stupid and it's hurting quality full-time employees who need the hours. If you insist on hiring all these people, there is nothing stopping them from doing exactly what I did. There are plenty of departments that could use help." I was fed up with Karen's attitude and spoke my mind. "Karen manager, if you think my management practice is so ridiculous, you can just leave." I was tired of her BS and just smiled. Me, "Okay, I will." I turned in my effects and clocked out. I said bye to my friends and drove home. The next day, I was enjoying sleeping in for once when I got a phone call. It was the new store manager. I answered. Me, "Hello, store manager. How are you this morning?" Store manager, "Sorry to bother you up, but could you come back to the store? I looked over the firing of you yesterday and Karen manager was totally out of line. I talked to other managers you have worked for and they all had glowing reviews of your work. We are pretty short-staffed and we need you back." Me, I smiled. It was always nice to be needed after all. "If you transfer me to grocery effective immediately with the pay bump to boot. I will help your department when needed, but I want grocery manager as my new boss." Store manager, "Done. I just pulled up your file and transferred you over. You have my word, grocery manager is your new boss and Karen manager has no authority over you anymore. I will be having a long talk with her over her managerial practices, believe me." I smirked and said, "Me, I will see you in 10 minutes. I drove to the store and walked in. I picked up my effects from the store manager and shook his hand. I saw the shocked form of Karen manager and snickered. I turned to a nearby customer with a smile. These last few weeks were going to be the best. Next story. Wanted me to translate, so I did just that. So during this summer, I decided to put my English skills to use at my part-time job. I work at a local tiny cafe on a small city in the middle of nowhere, so I oftenly go around and just say stuff like, "Oh hey, that shirt means this, this, and this." And people are just somewhat surprised and ask me questions about how I know English so well and yada yada yada. The usual European elder people talk. Well, there was this cousin of mine that just used to pass by for a cup of coffee on the way to work. He was very into video games and books and social media, The usual person in the mid-20s if you ask me. So one day he decided to ask me, "Hey, I want to learn English Sue, can you help?" And I was like somewhat surprised because nowadays if you want to learn any languages you just download an app and do daily exercises or just watch movies on that language. That's what I did. I told him just that, but he wasn't satisfied. He said he needs someone to be with him to check on how he evolves on the language. I know my cousin fairly well, we talk daily, so he wasn't shocked when I gave him a pocket face, asked his real reason. He said exactly this: "There is this one English girl that is a poet. She's fine and I want to hook up with her. I have this cool poem for them." I read it. I stood there for 3 minutes in silence. He just wanted to learn the language for a good night. Obviously, I said that it wasn't worth all the work and that he could just let me see the poem and let me translate it. He refused at the start, but then after some back and forths he ended up agreeing, but he agreed in a not-so-thankful tone. He sounded like a damn king sparing the life of a peasant, and he said, "Don't you dare change a thing on the poem. Just translate it literally and that's it." Okay, I'll translate it literally just for you since you asked so nicely. Your eyes is how the sky blue, stones brilliance on night starry. I myself ask if you can see the mines, because definitively I can see the yours the day all. Portuguese to English, if you are wondering which funny language is this. Next story. Finally able to give a Karen some grief. Karen manager. Store manager. A bit of background. I used to work at a popular grocery store that's known for rolling over for customers. I started working for this grocery store during my gap year before college. I wanted to save up some money before taking on the crippling burden that is student loans. When I started, the job was easy enough and the vast amount of people were kind. I didn't have to deal with a lot of Karens, and the hours were flexible. I really enjoyed my coworkers and managers. Life seemed great. That is until our department got a new boss. I don't know what it is about new bosses, but they always have to go on a power trip to consolidate power and to show everyone they mean business. Our Karen manager went around the department and started criticizing people for the stupidest things. Even if we were doing our job correctly, she would show up and tell us to work faster, and we were stealing company time. We all hated her, but she is our boss, so we just tried to do what we were told. I pride myself on finding the quickest and most efficient way to do a job. Thanks for the upbringing, Mom. I applied this to any of my duties for the day. It just so happened that the end of the day was coming up, and we had to return products that customers left behind non-perishable. Of course, I was voluntold to go do it. This wasn't an issue as I had done this plenty of times before. I went about my task and finished in about 10 minutes. The second I got done, my KM called me into her office, and the following conversation ensued. Karen manager, close the door. Now, do you know why I called you in here? Me, no? Karen manager, I am trying to improve efficiency in the department, and you took way too long to do those go-backs. I won't tolerate people slacking off in my department. Do you understand? Me, I wasn't slacking off trying to defend myself. I was just cutting me off, she reiterated. Karen manager, do you understand? Knowing I was being railroaded, I just sighed and said yes. Karen manager, to ensure you don't slack off again, you are forbidden from doing any more go-backs. I don't care if the store manager tells you otherwise. This is my department, and you will do as I say. I'm the boss. I get a smile on my face as I realize what she just said. I nod my head and reply. Me, understood, I won't do go-backs no matter what. My Karen manager replied with an umbrage smile and said, Karen manager, good, now go back to work and don't forget what I said. I'm the boss. Interneting around so she couldn't see my crap-eating grin and said, Me, don't worry, message received loud and clear. A few days go by without incident until I finally get a chance to put my malicious compliance into action. The front desk supervisor seems that the go-back cart is full and asked me to return the products. I smile and say, "Me, sorry, supervisor. Karen manager said I was wasting time and I am no longer allowed to return products." The supervisor gives me a weird look, but just shrugs and tells another coworker to do it instead. This cycle continues on for the next month. One day, the store manager happens to be manning the front desk. The end of the day rolls around, and he looks at me and says, "Store manager, hey, op, we have a lot of go-backs, and I need you to return them." Me, sorry, store manager, I'm not allowed to do go-backs anymore on account of slacking off. Store manager looks frustrated and says, "Store manager, I don't care if you are allowed to or not. I am telling you to take these back." Me, sorry store manager, Karen manager told me I am not to do any more go-backs no matter what, and I'd better follow her orders. Karen manager told me that this is her department and that she is the boss. Store manager looked pissed and stormed into the manager's office. A few minutes later, store manager called Karen manager to his office over the intercom. Karen manager came waddling out of her office and went into store manager's office. The door closed, and we could all hear muffled yelling. After about 10 minutes, the door opened, and Karen manager shuffled out. She glared daggers at me and told me to come to her office. I happily complied and said, "Me, yes, Karen manager, how can I be of assistance?" Karen manager, you are allowed to do go-backs again. That is all. I smirked and left her office, happy that I could put a Karen in her place. Update. I'm surprised a lot of people enjoyed my story. I will continue sharing stories from this job and a hospital I used to work at. Hope you all enjoy them. Update Part 2. I forgot about Rule 8. Hopefully OP doesn't really count. Everything else should be fixed. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share, and subscribe the channel our posts.